For nearly a decade, Idi Amin ruled Uganda with an iron fist, his paranoia and brutality growing unchecked. But even the most ruthless dictators have an end. And for Amin, that end would come in a humiliating defeat. This is the story of how the butcher of Uganda finally fell. A tale of war, betrayal, and exile. Welcome to Shadows of Tyranny, where history's darkest chapters come alive. Join us as we journey back in time to uncover the ruthless leaders and chilling events that shaped the world. By 1978, Idi Amin's Uganda was a nation in crisis. His erratic rule had decimated the economy, alienated foreign allies, and turned his own military against him. Yet, in an astonishing act of arrogance, Amin decided to expand his rule by invading Tanzania. It was the mistake that would cost him everything. Amin's forces launched an attack on the Kagera region of Tanzania, expecting an easy victory. His men looted and pillaged, believing that no one could challenge their leader's might. But Amin had underestimated his opponent. Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere was not a man to back down. He saw Amin's aggression as an unforgivable provocation. Within weeks, Tanzania assembled a coalition of forces, including Ugandan exiles, and prepared for war. "This is not just about Tanzania," Nyerere declared. "This is about removing a madman from power." The counteroffensive was swift and merciless. By early 1979, the combined Tanzanian and Ugandan rebel forces had launched a full-scale invasion. Amin's army, weakened by years of purges and mismanagement, was no match for the disciplined and determined Tanzanians. The war was brutal. Town after town fell to the advancing troops. The Ugandan military, once feared, was now retreating in disarray. Amin himself, still refusing to accept defeat, made desperate attempts to rally his forces, but the tide had turned. As Tanzanian forces advanced, they encountered horrific scenes, mass graves, evidence of torture, and the remnants of Amin's brutal regime. It was a stark reminder of the cost of tyranny. Reports of widespread atrocities committed under Amin's rule surfaced, including accounts of extrajudicial killings, ethnic persecution, and brutal suppression of dissent. International observers estimated that between 100,000 and 500,000 people were killed during Amin's reign. By April 1979, the final battle was at hand. Tanzanian troops had reached the outskirts of Kampala. Amin, once so confident in his absolute power, now faced the unimaginable. His capital was about to fall. On April 11, 1979, the unthinkable happened. Tanzanian forces entered Kampala. There was no heroic last stand, no dramatic defense. The city fell almost without resistance. The once mighty Amin was nowhere to be seen. Uganda rejoiced. The people, long oppressed, erupted into celebration. The dictator was finally gone. But the question remained, where was Idi Amin? In the days that followed, stories emerged of Amin's hasty escape. It was said he fled with only a handful of loyalists, leaving behind a nation in ruins. His cowardice in the face of defeat was a final insult to those he had terrorized for years. In the chaos, Amin's personal effects were discovered, luxurious possessions, evidence of his opulent lifestyle funded by the suffering of millions. His palaces, once symbols of power, were looted and vandalized by an enraged populace. Amin had fled. He had abandoned his army, his supporters, and the nation he had ruled with terror. His escape was made possible by a few remaining allies. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, once his close friend, provided him with a temporary refuge. However, Amin's presence was an embarrassment even to his former allies. In 1980, he was forced to leave Libya, finding exile in Saudi Arabia. For over 2 decades, the former dictator lived in quiet exile. Unlike the hundreds of thousands who perished under his rule, Amin lived comfortably, shielded from justice. He never stood trial for his crimes. Yet, even in exile, he remained defiant. In rare interviews, he dismissed allegations against him, claiming he was misunderstood, a ruler who had simply been misrepresented by history. His presence loomed over Uganda like a specter. For survivors of his atrocities, his unpunished existence was a cruel reminder of the past. Many feared his return, unable to believe that the nightmare was truly over. During his years in Saudi Arabia, Amin lived a life of relative luxury. Reports indicated that he received a stipend from the Saudi government and lived in a mansion in Jeddah. Despite his isolation, he maintained contact with a few loyalists and occasionally expressed a desire to return to Uganda, a wish that was never granted. Amin's health deteriorated in his later years. He suffered from high blood pressure and kidney failure, which eventually led to his hospitalization. In 2003, after slipping into a coma, Idi Amin died in Jeddah. There were no grand funerals, no public mourning, only the quiet end of a brutal chapter in history. Idi Amin died in 2003 of kidney failure in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. There were no trials, no official reckoning. He was buried quietly, his death barely making ripples in the world he once terrorized. Yet his legacy remains. Amin's rule left Uganda in ruins. The economy was shattered. Society was scarred. The ghosts of his victims haunt the country's history. Even decades later, his name is synonymous with unchecked brutality and power gone mad. For Uganda, recovery was slow. The scars of his regime took generations to heal. The world, having turned a blind eye for too long, was forced to reckon with its silence. How had such a man been allowed to rule for so long? How many warnings had been ignored? Amin's story serves as a grim reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of global accountability. His rise and fall highlight the consequences of indifference and the high price nations pay when tyranny goes unchallenged. In the years following Amin's downfall, Uganda struggled to rebuild. Successive governments faced the enormous task of restoring a nation devastated by war and tyranny. Despite the hardships, Uganda's people demonstrated resilience and hope, working to heal their country's deep wounds. Idi Amin's fall was a victory for Uganda, but the scars of his rule remain. He left behind a nation in ruins, a people traumatized, and a history stained with blood. His name is now a symbol of unchecked power, of what happens when the world turns a blind eye to tyranny. The question lingers, how do such men rise? And more chillingly, could it happen again? Join us next time as we continue to unravel the darkest chapters of history. Because to understand the past is to protect the future.